Good afternoon and welcome to the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources. For those of you that might feel that you need a little bit more elbow room, there is actually an overflow room in 3142. Will the committee secretary please call the roll?
Assembly members Considine.
Present.
DeLong.
Very present.
Gurr.
Here.
Hanson.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Karras.
Here.
Kasama.
Here.
LaRue Hatch. Marzola. Watts.
Barely present.
Chair Anderson.
And I am present. If you would please mark Assemblymember Marzola present when she arrives. I want to welcome everyone to this meeting, those here in Carson City, as well as anyone joining in Las Vegas or Elko or listening online. Our agenda for today includes 2 bill hearings, but before we begin, I would like to make some housekeeping announcements. First, just a reminder, if you would please make sure to silence all electronic devices while in the committee room. And committee members will be using their laptops to view handouts and/or other exhibits. Please do not view this as a sign of disrespect or inattention. We expect courtesy and respect in our interactions during the meeting, even if we may not agree with another person's position. If you are presenting or testifying, please sign in at the table by the door, and please leave a business card with the committee assistants. All exhibits, amendments, or other meeting materials must be submitted electronically to our committee manager no later than 12 p.m. on the business day before the meeting, and 15 hard copies brought to the meeting for members of the public. Proposed amendments also need to include the bill number, a statement of intent, and your name and contact information. When testifying in person, please turn on the microphone, clearly state and spell your name, and the organization, your agency, or agency you represent, if any, for the record. Please turn off the microphone each time you are done speaking. Public comment will be taken at the end of the meeting, and each person will be limited to 2 minutes. You may also submit written testimony or public comment in writing up to 24 hours after the meeting. And finally, please note that agenda items may be taken in a different order than those listed. 2 or more agenda items may be combined for consideration, and an item may be removed from an agenda or discussion or an item or an agenda may be delayed at any time. All right. So with that, we will all get started with our hearing on Assembly Bill 9. I will open the hearing on AB 9, which revises provisions governing the temporary conversions of agricultural water. Thank you to our bill presenters, Assemblymember LaRue Hatch and Kyle Roenick, to actually prepare the bill for us. Do I need to?
Thank you, Chair Anderson and Committee of Natural Resources, the greatest committee that is in the Nevada Legislature. My name is Selena LaRue Hatch, and I am the Assembly Member for District 25, and I am proud to present this committee bill of AB 9, and I will let my co-presenter introduce himself as well.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Kyle Roenick, Executive Director of the Great Basin Water Network, and thank you all for having us here, and really look forward to going through this with you. Thank you.
Assemblymember LaRue Hatch for the record. So we are calling this the Responsible Water Use Act, and I will give you a brief overview for those folks that maybe aren't experts in water law, and then I will pass it to my compatriot who will walk us through the bill. So as a refresher, under current water law, water is required to be put to beneficial use. If someone is not using it, they can lose their right. However, in dry times or in overpumped basins, this can lead to conflicts where we want to encourage conservation of our most precious resource, but we don't want folks to lose their private property water right in the process. So we are trying to find a mechanism by which individuals can maintain their right while also engaging in responsible practices like improving the flow of water, rejuvenating aquifers, and providing water for wildlife. We believe that this will reduce conflict and burdens on the state. The mechanism for that is this bill. The goal of this bill is to increase the time that a right holder is allowed to convert their agricultural water right for these purposes. This is currently in statute. What we are doing is extending the time, and we are adding in safeguards against speculation so that we can ensure that conservation is actually happening, that these appropriate uses are actually happening, and that this is only occurring in very narrow circumstances in basins where the state engineer has already identified problems. So with that said, I will pass it to Mr. Rorink, who will walk us through the bill with the amendment, because we do have amended language. That is an amendment that we have developed with many stakeholders and we are accepting, so that is what we will walk you through today.
Madam Chair, Kyle Rorink for the record. On the top provision in the amended language, when it says amend NRS 534-090, the relation relating to a contract or agreement under a formal federal land or water conservation program or a formal water conservation program approved by the state, we just want to have that in there to make sure that entities aren't double dipping per se, and that if there are existing programs, they again, you can't do the double dip, and so that is basically that language. Going to number 1 in the amendment. This is the part of the bill that really deals with doing non-pumping of irrigation water. As the Assembly member said, we already allow the temporary conversion of agricultural water, and in this provision, we're really solidifying non-pumping of irrigation water, non-pumping of groundwater. In basins where a state engineer has issued an order pursuant to NRS 534-030 or 534-120. Those are the sections of statute dealing with basin designations, and that's one of the tools a state engineer can use to limit or prevent pumping in a basin if a state engineer identifies a problem. And so that very clearly limits where this program can be used moving forward. Number 2, really important provision, especially to address some of those speculative concerns again. If a person is going to propose temporary non-pumping of irrigation water, this section says that the application must include the expected conservation purpose to be achieved through non-pumping. So an entity who would be applying for this, they would go to the state engineer's office, fill out an application, and this is where we would expect them to have to make a very detailed statement about what they are going to do. And this is one of the ways that we hope we could help weed out bad actors early, is that language about expected conservation purposes. Number 3 in the amendment, again, is just some conforming language up top. And then when you look at sub B, you see that we are extending the time frame from 3 years to 5 years. That 5-year number really is a way to have parity with NRS 533-380, which is the trigger law that we have for 5 years in terms of how long a water rights user gets to prove beneficial use, how long it takes them to begin demonstrating that they're actually doing what they say they're going to do when they apply for a water right. Moving down, Subsection C this is a safeguard, again, against speculation and bad actors. NRS 534090 sub 2 deals with extensions of time, an entity saying, I need more time to put my water to use. What this does is says, you can't use this program to try and get around that. Subsection D clearly says that this program cannot be used to prove a beneficial use for perfecting a water right, which is foundational, again, as we've said. Subsection E, dealing with NRS 533-3703, ensures that an entity can't try again and prove beneficial use when filing a change application pursuant to that section of statute. And so again, that's just another safeguard. Subsection F in the amendment ensures that in basins where the state engineer has submitted a groundwater management plan, or there is a groundwater management plan in that basin, you can't use this program to try and weasel out of getting cut somehow. You have to take your cuts. So again, that's just a really important safeguard to prevent speculators, bad actors. Number 4, this gives the state engineer discretion to deny someone who is filing an application to use this program. And number 5 just clarifies what happens whenever, if this entity so chooses to no longer participate in this program. And I did just want to go back to the subsection B of number 3 in the amendment, in that an entity can file for extensions after their first 5-year period. We're not changing this language, but they can file again with the state engineer to extend their conservation for 3 years. So with that said, be happy to take any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that thorough but yet quick presentation about water, and first time for that one, right? I know, I'm looking at people not in that's watching, they're like, wait, that was a water bill? That was so quick, so well done. Are there any questions from the committee? Looking around. I'm pretty sure somebody's gonna have a question, so I'm just gonna call on them randomly. Assemblymember DeLong.
I wasn't going to, but since you said it, I actually would like to hear from the state engineer, to hear what they have to say about this amendment.
If you're okay with that, as opposed to having that happen if they make the decision to come up at neutral,
Okay.
we can ask them at that point. I'm not comfortable yet doing that at this time. But if they do make the decision to come up during neutral, we can ask them, and if not, then after the neutral information, then I will ask them to come up, so be prepared.
You asked me to ask a question.
And I appreciate it, because the state engineer now is refusing to look at me, because I think he's worried that he'll have to acknowledge it. Thank you. Any other questions? Assemblymember Gurr.
Chair, I'm trying to figure out the questions. The amendment I just saw, it's kind of self-explanatory, but does this amendment and everything you're doing prevent speculation on water rights?
Madam Chair, Kyle Roehrig for the record to Assemblymember
Please
Gurr.
go direct.
I think on any application of water resources in the state, can you affirmatively 100% prevent speculation all of the time? No, but we do have Supreme Court precedent that outlaws it. So if we're not going to be doing anything because someone could speculate, someone could, break the law, then what are we really doing here? So I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Assemblymember LaRue Hatch for the record. Just to add on, with that said, there has been language added specifically to discourage speculation and specifically to increase oversight to avoid that to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you, Chair. There could be a couple more. It's just wandering around looking at them right now. Thanks.
Thank you. So as some other individuals are looking through it, I do have a question for you, if I may. If you could please go into a little bit more about, on the amendment, when it has to do with number 3. And that has to do, and specifically, when it comes for the temporary non-pumping, does that temporary item have to be filed in some way? And what exact, I think I know what the answer is, but if you could please explain a little bit further what exactly is meant by temporary.
Madam Chair, Kyle Roerink for the record. Temporary would mean that someday we would think that the water would go back to beneficial use. And so I can see how in number 3 sub B, where we do have the limitation for an entity to go back again and again, I think the important safeguard against 3B is that you need to be talking about, in section 2, you need to have expected conservation purposes to be achieved. And so I think where applicants who are going to the state engineer's office, filling out an application to do this, that is where they would really need to be clear and be honest in the beginning, and how to weed that out. I think time will tell, and what happens on their operations can be a really good indicator of whether or not they're living up to their word. Thank you.
Perfect answer to that, because I know that when we think about temporary, we usually think of, just one day, but in actuality, it is for a period of time. And part of that application, it states how long that is. Is that correct? Or is this kind of clarifying that it can only be 5 years in duration, must not exceed that?
For the initial, Madam Chair, Kyle Roerink for the record, for the initial application of this program, it would be not to exceed 5 years.
Thank you so much. Assemblymember DeLong does have a question.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering why, given all these safeguards about, trying to limit speculation stuff, why didn't you just limit this bill to certificated rights?
Madam Chair, through the chair, Kyle Roerink for the record. Assemblymember DeLong, that is a good question. And, I think there's permitted water out there, that could be senior. Not everything is always, not everything is always clear in terms of how rights look on the books. But, it's certainly something to consider.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get a little bit of additional information as you were walking through some of these proposed subsections in this section 3. In particular, you got to item E, shall not be claimed or considered as consumptive use, and then specifically talked about, I think one of these concerns around some of the safeguards would be a potential change application in the future. So essentially, kind of the attempt to put these water rights kind of on hold, and then potentially change their use down the road. So could you talk a little bit maybe around that specific piece and how that tries to address that, and then the thoughts in general of the safeguards working to mitigate against that possibility?
Thank you for the question. Kyle Roerink, for the record. Really, what we're trying to do is make sure that an entity just can't sit on this water, not using it, and say, oh, I've established a right at the same time. because how we establish water rights in the state is when you file your initial application to begin appropriating the waters of the state of Nevada, you're saying, hey, I'm gonna grow alfalfa with this, or hey, I'm gonna mine, or I'm gonna do some action with this water. And now with provisions like this, we're saying, okay, you don't have to use your water, and but you won't be subject to forfeiture. And so it all comes down to that timing piece, and how long can an entity not use that water without, let me backtrack here. I think the main issue is, we don't want entities to say, we are proving our use, we are proving our right to use this water by not using it. And so that's really where a lot of those safeguards in Section 3 are coming from. I hope that answers your question, sir. Thank you.
Any more questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for the presentation. We will now open it up to testimony and support. If you are in support in Carson City, please come on up to the table. And please remember to say and spell your name clearly. And try to keep it under 2 minutes, and there's nothing wrong with ditto.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Olivia Tanager. I'm the director of the Sierra Club's Toyabe chapter, the largest grassroots environmental organization in the state. On behalf of my organization, I'm proud to support AB 9. We believe with Nevada being the driest state in the nation, we need to be strategic and creative in the way that we're conserving water, and this bill does just that. And so going forward, especially as we move into drier and drier conditions, we believe strongly that we need more things like AB 9 put into statute to protect our precious water. We know it's the most precious resource in the state, and we are duty bound to protect it. So thank you for considering this bill, and we urge your support.
For the record, I'm Doug Busselman. I'm the Executive Vice President for Nevada Farm Bureau. As we evaluated the bill and what our position would be, we have policy that supports conservation. Conservation and speculation is sometimes in the eye of the beholder. We felt that the amended version of this bill addresses those concerns that we had. And actually, we also believe that as you look at the existing law as it now stands, we think the amended version of this bill makes the whole law much stronger and an improvement. So thank you for your consideration.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera-Georgeson. I'm the Deputy Director of the Nevada Conservation League. We're here in support of AB 9. Like the others before me have said, Nevada is the driest state in the nation. Our water resources are precious, and this is another tool to help conserve them. Thank you.
Hello, Will Adler with Silver State Government Relations, representing the Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe wanted to log support for AB 9 and then an additional support for the amendment for AB 9. We believe that this amendment actually, as Mr. Busselman declared, strengthens the current law that allows for conservation of agricultural waters. And this flexibility is kind of needed because it's not always best to use it or lose it. It's sometimes better to have some flexibility there, and I do think this bill widens that out and does a very good job of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing nobody in Las Vegas, and it appears that Elko is dark. So is there anybody on AVH?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 9, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to testify at this time.
Thank you so much. We'll now move into opposition. So if you'd like to testify in opposition to the bill, please come on up to the table here in Carson.
Madam Chair, Jay Dixon, for the record, testifying in opposition on behalf of Water Strategy Group and the 4 entities listed on my testimony backup. I just want to state that we are not opposed to protecting wildlife, conserving water to protect wildlife in special circumstances. However, AB 9 as introduced is a proposed modification to a legislative declaration with no statutory definition on what temporary conversions are. And the concern is what happens at the end of these temporary conversions. There's a much easier solution to this. It would be, this bill underscores the necessity for a simple and minor amendment to NRS 533345, allowing for temporary changes to existing water rights for up to 10 years or 5 years for all manners of use. This is precisely the change that was proposed in the original version of AB 90 from the 2023 legislative session, which proposed granting the state engineer statutory authority to approve temporary change applications for all manners of use for a period of up to 10 years, later amended to 5 years, but it was not introduced. It is recommended that the committee consider an amendment to AB 9 to include provisions of AB 90 as included in my attachment from the 2023 session. This simple change to AB 9 would empower the state engineer to lawfully implement the legislative intent of AB 9, just simple change applications. Right now, the state engineer can only approve a temporary change application for greater than 1 year for renewable energy projects. That's how it is, and we're proposing making that for all manners of use up to 5 years. It's real simple. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, Alex Tanchak, representing the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority and the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority. Generally, the authorities are supportive of the concept of not pumping groundwater as a conservation measure and are generally supportive of the amendment. There were still concerns from some of our members regarding the extension of the time, but I think we would be happy to have conversations with the proponents of the bill to see if our concerns can be assuaged.
Thank you. Any further testimony in opposition? Seeing none. Vegas and Elko still, nobody's there. Anybody on the line?
To testify in opposition of AB 9, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers to testify in opposition at this time.
Thank you. Next, we'll go into neutral. Is there anybody who would like to come forward to testify in neutral? Thank you so much for coming forward, State Engineer. Didn't know if you wanted to make a statement or if you're open to the questions.
Thank you, Chair. Adam Sullivan, for the record, Nevada State Engineer. I do have some comments, but I'm also willing to take some questions. So to start with, AB 9 as it was introduced, I'll just to start with, I'm testifying here as representing the agency that's responsible for carrying this out if it were to be adopted. AB 9 as it was introduced is very workable. It's clear what the intent is, what the use of the water would be. It's provided that the base right that's being changed would be in such a condition where you could have that temporary, for a really long period of time where you had a temporary change, provided that it met that standard. This is something that we could effectively keep track of within our normal course of business. Incidentally, just for information, the way that this is used, so this is a relatively new statute, and the way it's been used just a few times for situations where there's a groundwater right, and it's either so groundwater is then discharged at the surface to mitigate for impacts and provide water for wildlife. So it's been used a couple times, but it's not a widely used statute. So the amendment, I do have some concerns about. This is significantly changing this bill entirely. I appreciate the intent for conserving water and protecting the resource, but I've only seen this in the last hour. But at least in this form, I do not see this as narrow, and I have significant concerns that this is opening a wide door to speculation and abuse. Not what the intent of the bill is, but I anticipate that it would be misused, and I think it needs to be reconsidered. Now, as I talked about last week when I gave you a overview of our division and water issues, I talked about some criteria that I look at any bill that's proposed. And I want to go through and just make a couple of points to try to articulate why I see this as a problem.
So before doing so, if you are okay with that, what I'm wondering if there's been any sort of discussion with the individuals that are presenting the bill with the amendment. Has there been any discussion about this before, or is this realistically the first time you're seeing it, if I may ask?
Adam Sullivan, for the record, I saw a previous version of this. In working with the stakeholders in the past, this particular version is somewhat different.
Okay, so if you could go through, I understand totally that you want to go through those three things again for the criteria, respect it. But I'm wondering if it might be wiser to instead ask for the three of you to meet, possibly to go through those and see if there's some common language that can come up instead of going through it piece by piece today at this time, if you are comfortable with that. Would you be comfortable with that?
Adam Sullivan, for the record, I am comfortable with that. I don't want to be discouraging towards conservation efforts, but in its current form, just from an administrative procedures perspective and knowing what our office handles with different kinds of applications, this would be abused.
I appreciate that candor and honesty. Are you available for a few questions? Not many, because again, we are just walking through it at this time. But would you be open to a question or two from this committee?
Adam Sullivan, for the record, yes.
Thank you. Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Chair. I actually don't have a specific question. I really wanted to hear what the state engineer thought about these amendments, because these are a significant departure from what was presented in the original bill. So I might have questions after we see compromise language, but at this point, I just appreciate you being up here and talking. Thank you.
Thank you, and I know that this is a departure from doing it this way. So Assemblymember Hanson?
Thank you, Chair, and appreciate that you kind of going with the flow, pardon the pun. So I know that we want to have you meet with the bill sponsor and work through some of these concerns over the amendment, but perhaps maybe if you could list, you mentioned administrative procedures from that point of view, some of the difficulties you might have. Could you maybe elaborate on one that maybe is a real stumbling block, so that we might, because we're not all going to be privy to those conversations, it might just be nice to know kind of up front what is one of those administrative procedures or rollout that for your office with the.
Adam Sullivan, for the record, thank you for the question. So what this would allow for is anybody who holds a certificated irrigation right would be able to put it into this non-use status. And I think it's for a 5-year period, and then it could be extended for indefinitely, I believe, if I'm reading that correctly. And the idea is to have discretion on our office to evaluate, the merits of different applicants. But quite frankly, if somebody submits an application to our office and they say, well, it's for non-use of water under this provision, and our criteria is there water available? Well, yes. Would its use conflict with any other existing rights? Well, you're not using anything, so it wouldn't conflict. Would it be in the public interest? It's not harming anybody. I don't see that we would deny any of these applications. So this is it would be, I think a lot of people would take advantage of it because it's a free pass. You don't, to following water law that applies to anybody else. So in that sense, I'm sure there's people who would use this with good intent to protect the aquifer, but by and large, anyone who holds a water right, certificated irrigation water right, and doesn't have a need for the water would opt for this alternative. And then you have a portfolio of water rights that are not being used, that have no beneficial use, that at some point are gonna be reanimated and come back into the system. So it's serving to, potentially be a harm to those in the area who are beneficially using water. Because then there's no public noticing for when those water rights would come back into use. And so I'm projecting out pretty far, but I think this could be a problem in the future.
Follow-up? Yes, please. Assemblymember Hanson?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. But is it, I know, and I just saw the amendment myself, just not too long ago, and was really looking at the original bill. But in that scenario you mentioned, don't they, for these extensions, don't they have to have a renewal? I know we said for the duration, but isn't there a renewal after so many years? They've got to come and prove to you what they're doing? So in that review process, what is your purpose? What are you using the water for? How can you substantiate what you've done with this extension we've given you for a temporary use? Is there not still, even with the amendment, that review process?
Adam Sullivan, for the record. That's essentially what we do now with extensions of time, which are typically on a one-year basis, and that's part of our process. And I'll say that it creates challenges because built into the process, both with case law and the criteria in statute, we're very much there's much deference given to the water right holder to approve those extensions of time. And so we do have a lot of water rights that are in good standing that have get extension after extension after extension. And it's created this problem of paper water that's on the books. All these water rights that are in good standing that aren't being used, and it's part of the over appropriation problem. So it's not an easy problem to address, but here I feel like we're expressly providing a mechanism to make that problem worse.
Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you, Chair. So I am interested in hearing about kind of the framework through which you're evaluating this policy based on some of the points that you provided during your presentation. I think we've heard a little bit about the administrative impact. That was some of the questions asked by my colleagues. And I think right now you're talking a little bit about what you see as the resource protection implications. I guess I was just wondering if you could talk about it a little bit more. You said that you see this as potentially being an issue in the future, and you mentioned essentially paper water that's on the books that may not be used for some period of time, but then could come back into use and conflict. So could you just talk a little bit about what you see as the resource protection concerns, given some of the remarks that the sponsors provided about attempting to safeguard against speculation?
Thank you for the question, Adam Sullivan, for the record. And Chair Anderson, I appreciate your opening comments, because that is something that I would like to talk to the sponsors of. What is the vision for how that would work? Because I just have a really different viewpoint on the reality of that. So that's something to follow up with. But one thought I have is in looking into the future, if anyone can put their certificated rights into this protected non-use status, then it's essentially privatizing access to the public water resource, because if someone actually does have a need for the water, you would have to go to that private entity that's sitting on this non-use water to be able to have access to the water. And it's not entirely different than how it works now, but I feel like it's formalizing that and giving more validity to that private ownership of the water, not just water use as with the requirement for an actual beneficial use.
So thank you so much for taking our questions. Again, I know it's a departure. I look forward to hearing the conversations that will be taking place. Did you want to make any other neutral type of statements at this time?
Adam Sullivan, for the record, no, that's enough.
Anyone else attempting to make a neutral statement, whether here in Carson, in Vegas, or in Dark Elko? How about online?
To testify in neutral to Assembly Bill 9, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, you are unmuted and may begin.
Madam Chair, this is Jake Tibbetts. I tried to call in and support and I could not get through. Would you allow me?
Yes, please do so, if this will be under support.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Jake Tibbetts. I'm the Natural Resource Manager for Eureka County. Eureka County supports AB 9 with the amendment. We want to thank the Assembly Member LaRue Hatch and Mr. Rorink for working with us to address our concerns and build in some amended language to clarify the existing statute for these temporary conversions, close speculation loopholes, and incentivize conservation, including non-pumping of groundwater in specific and narrow circumstances. Specifically clarifying existing loopholes related to this, the beneficial use, consumptive use, clarifying the state engineer tools for disapproving of these types of temporary purposes. Those are things that are currently not in the statute. There was a question about whether this would apply to only certificated water, and the groundwater portion of this does. So when it does talk about applying only to perfected rights, that means certificated groundwater rights. So that provision would only apply to certificated groundwater rights. The existing statute is very open-ended related to wildlife, the quality or flow of water. These clarifications are not stated in the current statute. So we believe that is actually more open to speculation, and this, we believe this does close a lot of speculative loopholes existing. And we do want to point out that this existing statute, 533-0243, Eureka County has been specifically involved in at least 3 circumstances where the statute has been imposed. And then the last thing I want to note, that this exact language has been provided to multiple stakeholders, including on January 27th of this year, so about a month ago. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. And I think you cut out a little bit, so we might need to do a little bit of follow-up a little bit later, but thank you very much. Anyone else on the line?
Chair, there are no other callers for testimony.
Thank you so much. Would you like to make any closing statements or remarks? Excuse me.
Thank you, Chair. Assemblymember LaRue Hatch for the record. So I just wanted to close with saying this is a committee bill. This committee bill has included many stakeholders in the discussion, some of whom you heard today feel that this does close speculative loopholes. Obviously, those discussions will continue, but I think at the end of the day, we need to close the loopholes on speculation, and we need to figure out a way that we can encourage responsible conservation without harming existing rights. And I will allow Mr. Rorink his final statement as well.
Madam Chair, Kyle Roaring for the record. I think what Mr. Tibbetts was trying to say when he cut off a little bit was that the state engineer received this amendment on January 27th among many other stakeholders. There was what was submitted on Friday, maybe there was like a half or a quarter of a sentence change in one sentence, but we've had entities that have had this language since January 27th. And I think big picture, you know, in the state of Nevada, what are we going to do when we don't have dump trucks full of federal money coming in to promote water conservation? Because really, right now, like the only game in town recently for water conservation, like things that the state has done, has been hand out federal money. Which we're going to get into a little bit in the next bill, but what are we going to do when we don't have dump trucks full of federal money coming in? So that's a little bit of what this does and expands upon an existing program that was created in 2007 by some of the founding members of my board, and you know, we look forward to working with all parties and really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. So I think we will be closing the hearing on AB 9, and at this time we will take a 1-minute recess. All right, we're back in order, and I will at this time turn the gavel over to Vice Chair LaRue Hatch.
I will now open the hearing on Assembly Bill 104, which revises provisions relating to water. Thank you, Assemblymember Chair Anderson, in fact, Mr. Belanger and Mr. Biaggi for presenting this bill today. Please begin when you are ready.
Thank you, Vice Chair LaRue Hatch and members of the committee. For the record, I am Assemblymember Natha Anderson, and I have the honor and pleasure to represent Assembly District 30 in Washoe County. I am pleased to present Assembly Bill 104 before you today, along with Mr. Andy Bellinger, as well as Mr. Alan Biaggi. This bill comes out of a joint interim standing committee on natural resources, which I was fortunate to serve on as the vice chair this past interim. Whoa, that was weird. The interim committee unanimously recommended this bill draft request, which creates the Nevada Voluntary Water Rights Retirement Program, along with revising other provisions related to water. My co-presenters will actually walk you through the sections of the bill, but first I'd like to briefly discuss water rights retirement. As we all know, water is the issue in Nevada and has been since we started. We are always dealing with different items. One of the issues that we are currently dealing with is the groundwater basins that are over-appropriated and over-pumped. During the interim, we heard many times about water rights retirement programs in other states, as well as the voluntary water rights retirement pilot program that was actually started here in Nevada by the DCNR. The pilot program granted $25 million worth of American Rescue Plan Act funding to 4 entities: the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority, the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority, Walker Basin Conservatory, and Southern Nevada Water Authority. This program ultimately led to approximately 21,380 acre-feet of water rights being retired from willing sellers. Since a 1 acre-foot is enough to cover 1 football field and 1 foot of water, that's essentially 21,000 football fields worth of water rights being retired. Establishing a water rights retirement program in statute would be one step forward for our state and addressing an overappropriation and overpumping. Additionally, there are many other water-related provisions this bill helps to establish or clarify. This includes encouraging and promoting emerging methods of water reuse and eligibility related to receiving financial assistance for certain property owners with septic systems to connect to community sewerage systems. And I'm also going to say a little bit off script. One of the reasons why I'm bringing this forward is because I was meeting with my little city of Sparks saying, okay, what all do you need? And the biggest thing that I kept on hearing about was water rights and how to handle it and what to do with the overappropriation. And they had one or two little tiny bills, and so I talked with a few different people in water, and this is what they came up. This is one of the things that they've been working on already for a long period of time of, well, we just need to do some cleanup. So that's what this bill actually started off as. As, however, the interim committee continued to work, we found out that there was a little bit more to it. And so if with your permission, Vice Chair LaRue Hatch, I'd like to turn it over to my co-presenters who will walk you through the sections of the bill as well as the proposed amendment.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Biaggi, and that's spelled B as in boy, I-A-G-G-I, and I'm here today representing the Nevada Mining Association and also representing a diverse group of water professionals, most of whom are in the room behind me. And I hate to say this, Madam Chairman, but this is not one of those quick water bills.
No.
So this may take a few minutes, but I'll try and make it as quickly as I can.
Thank you.
As the chairman has indicated, we all know groundwater in Nevada is critical and is important for our economy, our industrial base, and for the health and welfare of our residents and our visitors. There are increasing stresses on our groundwater resources, including an increased population, climate change, and the need for reliable and up-to-date resource information. We all know that changes to water law are technically complex and politically challenging. And so our group has been meeting for quite some time during the interim to identify areas of consensus where changes to Nevada water law may be appropriate. While we discussed a lot of concepts and identified a number of issues, this group landed on a water rights retirement program. This voluntary program would allow willing sellers to relinquish water rights for compensation and direct the state engineer to permanently retire those rights from future allocation. Through retirement, these waters will not be pumped and will remain in the ground. As has been indicated, AB 104 builds upon the great successes of the Nevada Water Rights Retirement Program, and of course that program was funded by the American Rescue Plan Act, which will not be available at this time. And really what this bill does is anticipate for the future alternative funding mechanisms. While AB 104 deals primarily with water rights retirement, as has been indicated, it does have other water-related issues which we'll discuss. These include water reuse, variances to certain water quality standards, and in Southern Nevada, revocable rights, septic tanks, and turf removal. The language of AB 104 has had public review and input. Perhaps most importantly, it was presented to the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Natural Resources, which recommended the language to move forward as a committee bill draft request. So I'm going to provide a quick overview, section by section, try and do it as quickly as I can. And as Mr. Belanger will provide some amendments to the bill as it's currently proposed. So before I go through the section by section review, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I'm not seeing any questions at this moment, but I'm sure they will come up after the section by section.
I understand, thank you. So to begin, Section 1 simply amends NRS 533-030, which addresses the appropriation of groundwater, and its language for consistency with Section 4 of this bill. Section 2 of 3 amend NRS 533.370 and 371, and directs the state engineer to reject an application and refuse to issue a permit if groundwater rights are retired pursuant to Section 4 of this bill. This ensures that water rights that have been retired are not reallocated and remain in the ground. Section 4 amends Chapter NRS 534, which is underground water and wells, and does four things. First, it establishes the Nevada Voluntary Water Rights Retirement Program. And we tried very hard to come up with a catchy acronym for that, but NVWRRP is as close as we could get. Second, it allows the state engineer to retire water rights by means he or she deem appropriate. Third, it precludes water rights that have been retired from reallocation in perpetuity as reflected in sections 2 and 3. And 4, it sunsets the program in 2035. The sunset provision was put in place to encourage willing water rights sellers to come forward early and recognizes that this is a unique program that should be evaluated as to its success and effectiveness over time. Of course, the legislature always has the discretion to continue the program if they see fit. Section 5 and 6 are not components of the Nevada Voluntary Water Rights Retirement Program and were requested by the Southern Nevada Water Authority. These sections amend NRS 534, 120, and 125 to clarify temporary versus revocable permits and establishes a 1,250-foot drilling prohibition from domestic wells from a municipal water service line. And it should be noted that revocable permits are primarily located in the Las Vegas Valley. Sections 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 amend NRS 232, which address executive departments of the state of Nevada, and they establish the framework for this program. Section 8 creates the Nevada Conservation and Recreation Program within the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. The program is to be administered by its director and includes a grant program, the Nevada Voluntary Water Rights Retirement Program, and gives the director the authority to establish regulations to operate the program. Section 9, subsection 1 establishes the account for retiring water rights within the general fund. Subsection 2 provides the authority for the account to accept any direct legislative appropriation. And I want to make it clear, there are no direct legislative appropriations requested in this bill. And for the director to apply for and accept any gift, donation, bequest, grant, federal money, or sources of funding. Subsection 9 states that the money in the account can only be used for the Nevada Voluntary Water Rights Program. Subsection 4 allows for the investment and reinvestment of the funds, with the proceeds returning to the account, and this must be done in accordance with public investment provisions in NRS 355. Subsection 5 allows for funds to remain in the account with no reversion to the general fund, and subsection 6 provides authority to the director to partner with a public or private entity to apply for, obtain, and manage the funds in the account. Subsection 10 places the Voluntary Water Rights Retirement Program into the Nevada Conservation and Recreation Program, which was created in Section 8 of this bill. Subsection 1 outlines the goals of the program, specifically to protect natural resources, to bring groundwater basins into balance, to address conflict with existing rights or with protectable interests, and prevent over-appropriated basins from becoming overpumped. And I want to point out that Mr. Belanger will further address these goals in his amendments. Subsection 2 outlines how the director shall administer the program, specifically by using the funds in the account to identify and purchase water for retirement from willing sellers. Priority will be given to, number 1, basins where withdrawals exceed supply. 2, basins that meet the criteria specified in Section 10, subsection 1. And subsection 3 references the June 30, 2035 sunset provisions. Section 11, subsection 1, establishes an advisory committee for the Nevada Voluntary Water Rights Program, the members of whom are appointed by the director. The committee includes 2 members from agriculture, 2 members of the regional water authorities in counties with populations of 100,000 people or more, 1 member of a regional water authority in a county of less than 100,000, a nonprofit conservation member, a member who represents mining, and 2 ex officio members representing the state engineer and the state land registrar. Subsection 2 directs the advisory committee to consult with the director on regulation adoption and program administration. And subsection 3 states the committee shall not be paid or receive per diem. Subsection 12 defines the regulations the director may adopt to operate the program, to include the process for accepting applications, how water rights will be valued for their purchase, provisions to ensure the purchases and retirement are consistent with the goals and objectives of the program, compliance with any funding conditions or requirements, and methods of identifying and purchasing water rights consistent with this bill and the requirements of the state engineer. Section 13 is simply a consistency change in NRS 232.010. Section 14 adds the Nevada Conservation Recreation Program and the Advisory Committee for the Voluntary Water Rights Retirement Program into the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Section 15 is intended to eliminate the Advisory Committee from the department after the sunset date. Section 16 makes changes to NRS 349.981, the program to provide grants for water conservation and capital improvements. And this is a potential funding source for this program. Subsection 1B clarifies wording concerning the recovery and measurement of water. Subsection 1B7 allows funds in the program to pay for the removal of grass for water conservation purposes, and this is primarily a Southern Nevada water issue. Subsection 1B8 allows for program funds to be used for retiring groundwater. That is the purposes of this program. And subsection 1C again addresses the revocable permits in the Las Vegas Valley. Section 17 is a wording consistency change. And Section 18 is a little bit of a deviation. It is not associated with the Voluntary Water Rights Retirement Program. This section amends NRS 439.3672, which is Public Health and Safety, and clarifies in subsection 4 the condition for financial assistance to abandon a septic system and connect to a community system. This is an issue specific to Clark County and was requested by the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Section 19 amends NRS 445A.305 and again is not related to the Voluntary Water Rights Retirement Program. It is regarding water pollution control and was requested by the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. And in subsection 2D is a statement to encourage and promote the reuse and recycling of water by various means in the state of Nevada. Section 20 also amends NRS 445A, water pollution control, and again was requested by the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. Subsection 4 would allow the State Environmental Commission to establish a water quality standard variance pending the approval of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Such variances are allowed under the Federal Clean Water Act, and the conditions for the variance are outlined in subsection 4A and 4B. Section 20 will be addressing the deletion of the program once again after the sunset date. So with that quick overview, I think Mr. Belanger and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
With the vice chair's permission, may Mr. Belanger go through the amendments as well?
I was just going to ask you to do so. Now, to clarify, there are 2 amendments uploaded to Nellis. Can you just clarify, are both accepted amendments, or is just one of them the amendment that you're going through?
Thank you, Vice Chair. This is Andy Belanger with the Southern Nevada Water Authority. Here today present the conceptual amendment. The one I am speaking to is the one that is dated February 20th, 2025, and has the list of the jointly submitted participants of the Water Working Group on it. I did notice there was another amendment from a person related to the advisory committee that's referenced in section 11. I'll talk about that, but it is not something that we had considered. I don't know that we have a concern with it. Essentially what that amendment suggests is that the members of the advisory committee be private sector members, and that is what we contemplated, is that they would be representatives of various entities. I think the the amendment referenced that they didn't want them to be DCNR, Department of Conservation Natural Resource employees, and that list would not have any DCNR employees there. So I'll go through the amendment fairly quickly, and then we're happy to answer any questions. What we, as a working group, have talked about is amending Section 2 and Section 3 of the bill to strike the words groundwater rights have been retired pursuant to Section 4 of this act. We, as a group, believe that the language that's in Section 10 is strong enough related to the in perpetuity language that reference isn't necessary, and it creates a bit of a problem, particularly in Section 3 that has to do with temporary permits. We don't want to accidentally preclude the state engineer from being able to issue permits for temporary uses in basins that where an order has been issued to preclude new appropriations because a water rights retirement program has existed. And so we're trying to make that clear. A water rights retirement program would keep those water rights from being used in perpetuity, but we don't want to necessarily close the basin for new temporary uses or other purposes that may exist. Section 4 of the bill, we wanted to clarify that water rights could be donated and not just purchased, so that language is there. And then we took the reference to groundwater in that fifth line there and changed it to any groundwater right that's been retired pursuant to this section is not available for any use. So we wanted to make that clear, that groundwater as a nebulous term wasn't what we were talking about, but that specific groundwater right there. And then in subsection 2 of Section 4, we included language that said the state engineer shall not accept new applications to retire any rights pursuant after the date. There was a little bit of a mix-up because in Section 10, there's a reference to the director not accepting new water rights, and the language here says shall not retire. And so what happens if the director's accepted on that date, but the right hasn't physically been retired? We want to make sure that syncs up. That language probably needs a little bit of working through. It may need to say shall not accept new applications to retire any water rights or retire those such rights. But we'll work through that issue. In Section 10, you'll see that we tried to streamline the conditions related to the groundwater water rights retirement program. So the language in B and D related to overpumped, we massaged that language a little bit and really want to address declining groundwater levels. And there's some conversation that's occurred with the group about, you know, using overpumped and over appropriated standards because they rely on the perennial yield, that it would be safer to address declining groundwater levels as the standard there and the purpose of the program. In subsection 2, we've made some changes to address that issue of this would happen in areas where an order from the state engineer precludes the issuance of new appropriations and the retirement of rights meets those sections that are referenced in subsection 1. And then we also wanted to make sure that it was clear that when the director of DCNR does retire water rights, that it is documented and that those documents are included in the files of the state engineer, so that when future considerations are happening in those groundwater basins, we have a clear record of why those rights were retired, so that we can make sure that we have that information. In section 11 of the bill, we had a working group meeting, a larger working group meeting on November 6th, and one of the things we heard was we should add a tribal representative and a recreational interest representative to that advisory committee. And so you see that those additions have been suggested in section 11 of the bill. Section 16 of the bill conforms with what we just did in section 10 as far as removing the 2 overpumped sections and adding the address declining groundwater levels. And then you will see in section 17, we had a request from some of the rural water authorities that they would like the water right retirement program to not require a match. Every other program under the Capital Improvement Grant Program would still require a match, but for water right retirements, we would not require a match. And that's why you see except as provided in clause 8 of paragraph B. That's specific to the water rights retirement section. And then we did get some feedback from NDEP that they would prefer the word median instead of average there, since that's the standard that is available from those agencies that look at household income. Section 21.5 and section 21.7 relate to programs of the Southern Nevada Water Authority. The groundwater management program that was established by the legislature in 1997 has a requirement for filling vacancies that has become unnecessary because the program is a lot more voluntary. Whether we establish a groundwater program, an advisory committee, the way that vacancy would have been filled was inconsistent with the way that program is established now. So we made that change there, proposing that change there. And then section 21.7, last session there was a bill that authorized the Water Authority to create a water efficiency monitoring program, and it had a specific deadline of not later than January 1, 2025, so that businesses had a year of time in order for them to know that program is going to be established. Well, that deadline has come and gone, and that program isn't up and running yet. And so we wanted to make it clear that not sooner than 1 year before a program like that is established, that they're notified, so that we honor that commitment that we provide a year of notice before that water efficiency monitoring program is established. And with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Before doing so, I do, Assemblymember Anderson, for the record, I do have just two more things just to bring up. The first is there's a large amount of changes coming forward. I want to make sure that that's clear, that I think everybody's involved in this discussion understands there's not just one element, that there's numerous elements. This working group started working together in December of 2023, meeting probably every 6 to 8 weeks. Since session started, I know that they've continued to work, and finally, I just said, we got to get this started. Because as is true for anything that deals with water, especially with so many different things, we could continue to discuss further and further and further. So I want to make that clear. But then the other thing is that although this is a policy committee, we need to also be realistic. There's a budget area as well. And so before concluding our presentation and standing for questions, I just want to address that there is a fiscal note that has been submitted from DCNR in the amount of $328,000. For the biennium, it's related to the costs associated with hiring a full-time staff member. That is not one necessarily that we need to talk about in this committee. It is a policy committee, but I do want to acknowledge that it is present and that we are in discussions with the division to try to figure that out. So we'll try to answer your questions as they come up. Thank you for this time.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and we do have some questions. We will start with Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I actually have multiple questions, so however you would like me to go, I'll start with my first one. First one is on section 2, subsection 2, at the very end with the arrow, line 21 through 23, stricken those grounds and then inserted any such grounds. Trying to understand why that change was made, because it then, at least my read of it, says rather than referring back to the grounds as to why the state engineer made a decision, it's anything that the state engineer may think, regardless of whether it was relevant at the time of his decision.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. This is Andy Belanger. For the record, this is actually language that was in SB 176 from last session and is carried over in both this bill and in the other water right retirement bill. So I think this is a LCB cleanup language on that. It's not material to what the bill was trying to accomplish, but I believe that as it went through, that initial review from LCB, all of the language here as far as changing the subsection 2 was directly from SB 176 last session.
Okay, to be clear, you can go direct, and we'll go with 2, and then we'll come back to you.
Okay, that sounds good. I do have more than 2. The next one has to do with section 3. Your amendment says deleted by amendment, but the way you describe the amendment sounds like you were only deleting subsection 6. Could you clarify what the intent of the amendment is?
Yes, this is Andy Belanger for the record. That is what we are proposing, is to delete subsection 6 of that. That's the only change in that part of the bill. So by doing that, it would remove the entire section, because section NRS 533-371 would remain as it currently is in statute.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, thank you so much. We will go to Assemblymember Watts.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. So looking through this, again, I understand that this is not the Money Committee, but since you did bring it up, I was looking through the fiscal note, and it mentions in particular the development of regulations, which I believe is required under Section 12 of the bill. And then it talks about some of the staffing needed, particularly for essentially the Groundwater Rights Retirement Program, discussing how the ARPA-funded position is going to transition out. So do you, in terms of continued conversations, do you have anything in mind that would help address some of those issues?
Assemblymember Anderson, for the record, thank you for bringing that up. I think the first thing is the regulations have already been utilized once, and so that is one way that we could use that as one area. The second item, it has to do with staffing, and I think that's actually a little bit more of a discussion that's going to have to take place. How much time is necessary? Where exactly is that working with the staffing area? Is it communications with the cities, with the counties that are also mentioned in another area? Or is this completely at the state? And those sort of conversations are the ones that we're really concentrating on at this time. I didn't know if you wanted to add to that.
Thank you. I'm happy to add, this is Andy Belanger for the record. What we have heard from the department is that they're concerned primarily with standing up a program when the funding, even though we've identified a funding source in the bill, is going to be fairly anemic compared to what it looked like over the last biennium, right? And so the staffing, the regulations, the advisory committee, all of those are provisions that might be needed in the future. But what we're hearing from the department is that they want to right-size the program for what they anticipate the funding potential to be over the next biennium, and come back at a later date if the program needs to come back. So I think there's an opportunity for us to work with the department and really get at the heart of what we're trying to establish in this bill as far as setting up a water right retirement program. And I think if we do that, we can either eliminate or reduce much of that fiscal note.
Thank you. And then I do have a question for Mr. Biaggi. Would any portion of this bill impact the East Fork Swimming Pool District?
Mr. Watts, thank you for that. Mr. Watts is referring that I am an elected member of the esteemed East Fork Swimming Pool District. And any groundwater saved is groundwater that can go into our pool, and I'm all for it.
Thank you for the most critical question of the hearing. We will go to Assemblymember Gurr.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I have several questions, but in the interest of time, I'd just as soon donate those to Assemblyman DeLong, since I can't use.
I'm not sure if that's how it works, but that's okay. We are going to get back to him in a moment, but we have some other members first. So Assemblymember Karas.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and Vice Chair, I should say. And thank you for bringing this bill forth, and thank you for walking us through the very extensive amendments. My question is on not an amendment. You didn't address anything in section 18. My question is on the septic tanks and conversion. Because when people live too far away from public sewer systems, they had to pay to have the septic systems put in. Now they're going to be paying to join to the infrastructure that has become near them. And I'm assuming, I see that there are grants in various ways that can get paid for, but I'm assuming it's going to be for our lower income citizens. And so the people that can afford it are being hit twice?
Thank you, Assemblymember Karas. This is Andy Belanger for the record. So yes, that's a really good point. So what we were concerned about with Section 18 of the bill is when we worked on this last session, we essentially said that the health district was going to stand up a voluntary program to assist septic owners to connect to the sewer. But one of the conditions in that bill was that if they did not agree to do that, then they would be forever banned from getting financial assistance. And we were concerned that that was too punitive a measure in that bill. And so in talking with the health district, as they were working on putting their program together, they came and said, hey, does it make sense for us to say, if they pay back the amount that they would have paid, can they get back into line and get the advantage of the financial assistance? And so that's what Section 18 of the bill does, is it provides a mechanism by which a septic owner who chose not to pay the fee can repay the fee and get back into line and be eligible for financial assistance. We talked about the financial assistance program about a week or so ago when I provided that presentation to the committee. And that voluntary, fully funded program would be funded through that voluntary fee that the health district would charge. And then obviously supported by grants and other funding that we have available. But the key to that is that we don't want people who inadvertently said, I don't want to participate, to be forever banned from being able to participate.
Follow up? Yes. If I may. That's about as clear as mud. So let me say the way I think I'm reading it, and then please correct me, because I am probably wrong. So I'm not going to go into they could have before and now they're going to, but it looks to me like they have to pay a fee to be in the voluntary part of it, of a fee. I'm not getting it, because are they paying a fee to be able to sometime join the infrastructure on top of an annual fee they have to pay anyway? I'm not getting where these fees are going.
Thank you, Assemblymember Karas. This is Andy Belanger. So the health district hasn't established a program for septic conversions yet. If they do establish that program, then property owners who have septics will have to decide whether they want to pay the fee or not pay the fee. And if they pay the fee, they would be eligible to receive financial assistance. If they don't pay the fee, then under the current statute, they would not be able to get financial assistance. And the financial assistance is the 100% of the cost of connecting to the sewer. So right now, a property owner with a septic is not required to connect to the sewer at this point, but there are ordinances and health district regulations that say that within a certain distance they would be required. And so it's an opportunity for them to have a funding source that could help them connect when they choose to.
Thank you. Fine points that I don't quite get, but thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We will go to Assemblymember Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you for being here, you brave souls taking on an omnibus water bill. If you could for me clarify in section 2, my colleague, Assemblyman DeLong brought it up. I'm still trying to understand. I heard the explanation about striking those grounds, inserting any such ground. And you mentioned that a former bill legislation used that language. So I guess I just have concerns that it is too broad, like any such ground could be subject for the rejection. Maybe give me a little history. Why was it so specific on those grounds, but now we're opening it up to any such ground? And maybe this is much ado about nothing, but I'm gonna ask the experts.
Thank you, Assemblymember Hanson. This is Andy Belanger for the record. I don't know that we have strong feelings on that word. If the committee prefers it to be those grounds, I think we're fine with that. I think there is probably a question that needs to be asked of legal staff as far as why that was the language that they chose there. But from our perspective, that wasn't something that we wrote into the bill. And so if there is a reason for that, that we're not aware of, that probably needs to come from legal.
And we are currently checking with legal to see if that's something that they can clear up for us.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And then if I could, a second question in regards to sections 5 and 6. I'm gonna have to go off the top of my head because my computer just closed out. I think this section was a request, as Mr. Biaggi said, on behalf of Southern Nevada Water Authority. Can you, here, I'm doing definitions today.
Yes.
Why the switch from temporary to revocable, just so we can understand why and how that works?
Yes, so Assemblymember Hanson, this is Andy Belanger. So the temporary water rights that were issued starting on March 24th, 1955 in the Las Vegas Basin have colloquially been called the revocable rights. Those are different from the temporary rights that the state engineer manages for a whole host of other purposes. You heard about them in the previous bill. You've heard about them in the amendment that was suggested on the previous bill. Those temporary rights are different from these Las Vegas specific revocable rights that were issued in 1955 and were granted so that the valley could continue to grow until the Colorado River water was available for the community. That confusion between temporary rights in 534, 120, and 125 and the other scheme of temporary rights has caused confusion in water law. And so what we're trying to clarify here is that these rights are different, these temporary rights are different from those temporary rights, and what we thought would make the most sense is to call these rights what they are, which is revocable rights that were granted with the express understanding that when municipal water was available, they would be revoked, and have been in most cases in the Las Vegas Basin.
Thank you for clarifying that, because, you know, people hear things when they get a bill, and then a lot of stories were being written in our heads, and so appreciate you clarifying so we can put to rest some concerns. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else with a first-time question? I know. All right, then we will go back to Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Only 2 more questions. Section 4, and then I think it goes on, and this question will relate to some of the other sections about the retirement program. My assumption is that the implementation of this program and the purchase of these water rights, which would then be revoked, does not change the concept of the perennial yield or quote-unquote the total amount of water that would be available for permits in any given basin.
Alan Biaggi for the record. And Mr. DeLong, just a a clarification. It's not revoked, it's retired.
Retired,
Yeah.
sorry, thank you,
And
yes.
so that's correct. It would not change the basis for the perennial yield and the amount of water available within the basin, but it would change the amount of water allocated and pumpable for the basin.
Thanks, I just wanted to get that on the record. And my second question is somewhat along the same lines, following on Assemblywoman Hanson's questions on section 5 and 6. And I think it also goes to section 17. The change from temporary to revocable, the intent of, or the reality of that is it does not change the status of those rights in the Las Vegas Valley. It's just a nomenclature change.
Yes, Assemblymember DeLong, this is Andy Belanger for the record. Yes, this is just a nomenclature change. I will note that there is that reference to 1,250 feet that you see in the bill as well. I just want to point out at the bottom of page 8, lines 42 and 43, that was just a miss from the last legislative session. We got the 1,250 feet there. We didn't get it there. So we're just trying to conform that standard the same. So there is no functional change to any of the statute. It is simply nomenclature.
Thank you. Again, I just wanted to get that on the record because my email's been blowing up on that issue, so I think it would be good to have it. Thank you very much.
It seems Assemblymember Gurr is reclaiming his question.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, Assemblyman DeLong didn't take the advantage of me. But really, the question came up from Assemblywoman Karas's comments. When you hook to the state or to the municipal sewer, who's responsible for taking care of the septic tank that's left in the ground? And is that the owner's problem, or is there a method to fix that?
Thank you, Assemblymember Gurr. This is Andy Belanger. So since we established the partially funded septic conversion in the Las Vegas Valley, we have paid for those septic tank abandonments as part of the conversion that is happening. So there are health district, ISDS regulations that have to do with the process of abandoning septic tanks. And that process is followed as part of a septic conversion. And so it is funded through those septic conversion programs that the legislature authorized 2 years ago and have been stood up.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And it looks like we do have a legal response on the question from Assemblymembers DeLong and Hanson. So AVH, if we can go to Las Vegas to legal counsel to allow them to answer.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jeff Cronister, Committee Counsel for the record. I just want to weigh in really quickly on that issue in terms of our office changing the language from those grounds to any such ground. The reason that we do that is we just see the word those to be somewhat ambiguous. In this occasion, there are 4 specific grounds in which the state engineer shall reject an application. So we say on any one of these grounds, the state engineer shall reject that application. And in turn, we say any such ground to refer to any one of those 4 grounds. So that way in the future, if those grounds are amended, the word those is still clarified. So we use any such ground to refer to the same 4 grounds and does not open it up to the possibility of other grounds that allow for rejection. Thank you.
Thank you. And could you please lay out what those 4 grounds are so we can get some clarity?
Sure, Jeff Cronister, Committee Counsel for the record. Just in the way that section 2 or subsection 2 is laid out, specifically says the state engineer shall reject an application and refuse to issue the requested permit if, and then paragraph A, there is no unappropriated water in the proposed source of supply. Paragraph B, the groundwater that has not been committed for use has been reserved pursuant to NRS 533.0241. Paragraph C, the groundwater rights have been retired pursuant to Section 4 of this Act. Or paragraph D, the proposed use or change conflicts with existing rights or with protectable interest in existing domestic wells as set forth in NRS 433.024.
So to clarify, any such ground is the 4 previous listed grounds.
Vice Chair, thank you. That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a question from Assemblymember DeLong.
Thank you, Vice Chair. And just for the, for legal's knowledge, we're down to 3 based on the amendment. But rather than any such, could we say the above listed grounds? That then makes,
And Assemblymember, I think we will pause, because I think we want to discuss amendments offline, just so we're not here
that's fine.
wordsmithing all night, but I do appreciate that we will have those discussions. Okay, any further questions? This will surprise you not at all, but I do actually have a question, because I think Assemblymember DeLong and I compete for most questions. So my questions are both actually on page 8, section 4. It's a very popular section. I was really struck by the word "in perpetuity." I think that's an important word in this statute, and I just wondered if you could speak to why that is the word that was chosen and the importance to meeting the aims of this initiative.
Thank you for the question, Alan Biaggi, for the record. One of the things that we want to ensure is that groundwater, a willing seller does not sell his groundwater or her groundwater, and the state engineer puts it aside. And then 3 state engineers down the road, the state engineer says, oh gosh, there's some water there, that's for appropriation. That's essentially wasting the money that was put forward to retire those water rights. So we want to be sure that those water rights are placed somewhere where they can never again be allocated. They stay in the basin and they stay there for the natural resource benefit and are not subject to further allocation down the road.
Thank you. My second question is about the time. I note that it's basically 10 years that we're going to run this program, and the whole purpose is to get us back in balance, right? Because we have issued far too many rights for a lot of these basins. My question is, why was the 10 years chosen, and is that enough time to get us balanced?
Thank you for the question, Alan Biaggi, once again. The 10-year timeframe was rather arbitrary. We're thinking 10 years would be a reasonable amount of time to see if this program can get up and running. In no way should it be assumed that basins will come back into balance in 10 years. It's taken 50, 100 years to get the basins out of balance. It'll probably take much longer to get them back into balance. But we felt that it was a good time frame for a reevaluation of the program to determine its effectiveness and whether or not it should move forward or not.
Okay, with that, I see no other questions, so thank you so much. Too late, you missed your window. You have to follow up. All right, we will begin with testimony in support of AB 104 here in Carson City.
Madam Chair, Kyle Roerink, Executive Director of the Great Basin Water Network. We support AB 104 and the amendments. And, I just wanted to say that drops of water and aquifers, they don't have GPS trackers, air tags, and that question about how do we make sure that investments in retiring rights remain is something that all parties are really committed to. We look forward to having continued discussion, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera-Georgeson, Deputy Director at the Nevada Conservation League. We are here in strong support and have been supportive of a water rights retirement program in the state for many, many years now. There was just some recent polling that showed that 92% of Nevadans are concerned about inadequate water supplies in our state, and this is a very important tool to help conserve water and hopefully get our basins back on balance. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair LaRue Hatch, members of the committee. My name is Leo Drozdoff, representing the Truckee Meadows Water Association. We are in support of AB 104. We're in support of the amendment presented by Andy Belanger, and I was a member of the group that met during the interim. And we do appreciate Chair Anderson's, as she alluded to in her remarks, sort of bringing the groups together throughout the interim and herding the cats so that we could present this for you today. Thank you.
Vice Chair for the committee, I'm Doug Busselman. I'm the Executive Vice President of Nevada Farm Bureau. We greatly appreciate having had the opportunity to participate as one of the stakeholders throughout this process. I'd also like to commend Alan Biaggi for his leadership in pulling our group together to have these meetings that have been very inclusive. And just for background information as far as the process goes, those of us who participated in this working group, if there was something that one of us didn't agree with, it was removed. So what you're seeing is a consensus product that we were able to agree with. Plus then we had additional meetings to bring other members in to discuss and to suggest their amendments. So I think the process has been very effective, and we appreciate having been part of it. Thank you.
Will Adler, representing Silver State Government Relations, representing Pyramid Lake Paiute Tribe. I wanted to log a support for AB 104 and the amendment in AB 104, specifically Section 11, as it does add a tribal member to the bill. But just going through the history of water law in Nevada, this has actually been a concept and a dream for a while to actually have a mechanism to do proper retirement of water rights. This is an old Pete Gogachi one, actually, for quite a while. So I'm actually pretty proud of the efforts here, and I do commend the subcommittee or grouping of folks that put this together, because it is a well-done piece of legislation, or an attempt at, and it's something Nevada needs. So thank you very much.
Hello, committee. My name is Laurel Saito, and I am, and that's S-A-I-T-O, and I am the Nevada Water Strategy Director for the Nevada chapter of the Nature Conservancy. And it's our pleasure to speak in support of Assembly Bill 104 as amended. The Nature Conservancy supports enabling tools to resolve overuse of groundwater that can affect water availability for plants, wildlife, and people. Water law allows curtailment by priority, but this may not resolve the issues if water rights curtailed are not affecting the existing users or detriments to natural resources. So this bill offers another tool to address this situation. And we've worked with others to develop language in the friendly amendment that will make voluntary groundwater rights retirement an effective tool for addressing groundwater overuse in Nevada, and we're committed to continuing work on the bill. The Nature Conservancy also stands ready to assist the state in enacting this program by seeking funds and implementing projects that can demonstrate effective groundwater rights retirement. So we urge your support for this important legislation.
Good evening, Chris Mahana here on behalf of Churchill County. I too was a member of the working group over the last 15 months or so, and I want to thank my colleagues for working with us. I am in support of the amendment, the friendly amendment, which Mr. Bellinger submitted. I think there's some very important changes to sections 2, 3, and 4 in the amendment. I would not have been in support of the bill as originally drafted, so I thank the group for that. Thank you.
Olivia Tanager, Director of the Sierra Club's Toyabe chapter. For the record, I'll echo my colleagues' support for this bill as amended. This certainly is a program that has been a long time coming, and we're appreciative of the effort that got us this far and look forward to this bill continuing to move forward this session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Alex Tanchak, representing the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority and the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority, here today to express our support for the bill with the amendments as presented. As previously mentioned, this past interim, both the CNRWA and HRBWA were able to implement programs for the retirement of groundwater rights. These programs ended last year, but through those programs, the CNRWA and HRBWA were able to retire over 17,000 acre-feet of water rights in 3 basins that are overpumped and seeing declining groundwater levels. We think these programs have been beneficial to those groundwater basins and see a state program as being something of tremendous value. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
Do we have any more testimony for support here in Carson? Seeing none, I see nobody in Las Vegas and no one for sure in Elko. So AVH, can we please go to the phones?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 104, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, you are unmuted and may begin.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. This is Jake Tibbetts again for the record. Eureka County is in support of this bill. We are also part of the working group, and we'll just ditto the comments. Really appreciate the process and these diverse viewpoints being able to come together and find common ground on the water issue. We're specifically very interested and supportive of the voluntary water rights program. We've seen firsthand how water rights retirement can immediately address the issues intended to be addressed by the bill. Water rights retirement provides the greatest and most quickly available tool to reach water use balance that is not driven by conflict and litigation-centric measures. We look forward to continued conversations to finalize the language. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, this is Nick Calero with the Pew Charitable Trust. And on behalf of the Pew Charitable Trust, I'm just calling in today to express our support for Assembly Bill 104. AB 104 will provide a needed tool to compensate willing water rights holders to retire their water rights in perpetuity, which will prove to conserve water, reducing groundwater decline into the future. The Pew Charitable Trust did submit more comprehensive comments via the portal, and we look forward to being a resource on this bill as amended moving forward. Thank you.
Chair, there are no additional callers to testify in support.
Thank you. We will now open up testimony in opposition to AB 104. Seeing none in Carson, none in Vegas, none in Elko. AVH, let's go to the phones.
To testify in opposition to Assembly Bill 104, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair. My name is Robert Coche, C-O-A-C-H-E. I'm a former deputy state engineer with over 4 decades of experience in water rights related work, both in the public and private sectors. Today I'm representing myself in opposition to AB 104. It is my firm belief that we cannot buy our way out of our groundwater issues, and this bill will not resolve the challenges we face. The execution of the previous 2023 legislative pilot buyback program amplifies the flaws and waste inherent in AB 104. Based on the information I have to date, the 2023 buyback pilot program led to the purchase of over 21,000 acre feet of groundwater rights at a cost of around $25 million. Of the water rights acquired, approximately 50% comprised of dry water, meaning that these were paper water rights with no actual beneficial use. Thousands of acre feet of wet water were purchased in an area where no existing water rights were impacted directly or through groundwater surface water interactions by the acquired rights. And thousands of acre feet were purchased in Diamond Valley, which already has a groundwater management program in place, approved by the water right holders in Diamond Valley to bring the Diamond Valley hydrographic basin into balance with the perennial yield. As a result, millions of taxpayer dollars were spent on water rights that had no impact on the environment, conflict resolution, or were already a part of an active groundwater management program put in place by the actual water right holders, all of which wasted millions of taxpayer dollars, contrary to the intent of the 2023 legislation. I've previously testified before this committee asserting that no public funds should ever be allocated to a groundwater buyback program when the state engineer already possesses the statutory authority to address groundwater conflicts and conjunctive use issues. The wasteful expenditure of millions of taxpayer money on the 2023 pilot buyback program underscores the ineffectiveness and the wastefulness of such a program. Instead, any potential public funds should be invested in actual science to identify problems and support conflict resolutions under existing
Sir,
statutes.
could you just
Thank
wrap
you
up
for your.
Thank you. Next caller.
Chair, there are no additional callers to testify in opposition.
Thank you. We will now open up testimony in neutral. Seeing no one approach in Carson, no one in Vegas, and no one in Elko. AVH, please open the phones.
Chair, there are no callers to testify in neutral.
Okay, I will leave it to presenters who are waiving their right. So I will close the hearing on AB 104. We will now start with public comment. As a reminder, members of the public can provide public comment in person, by phone, or submit written public comment to the committee's email up to 24 hours after this meeting. Instructions for providing public comment can be found on the agenda, including the call-in information. Public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker, and we will time them because we want to leave. So please remember to clearly state and spell your name. Anybody here for public comment in Carson? In Vegas? In Elko? AVH, anyone on the phones?
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no callers at this time.
Okay, that concludes our meeting for today. Our next meeting will be on Wednesday, February 26th at 4 p.m. Thank you. Thank you.